it's funny how close I think a lot of bands have been to breaking up that their fans would never know. We've had multiple conversations that if the conversation on the phone didn't go a certain way, we probably would have broken up. But I think everyone ultimately was like, what are we without the word alive? And it's the world without the word alive is a scary thought for us, or at least it was before. Now I think we're in the healthiest place overall that we've been. So you transition from the worst time, and we were like, if we're going to be able to make another record, if we're going to be able to do this, we need to do it the right way. Hey guys, it's Telle.
And this is Matt.
And this is the oral history of the Word Alive. So when I first tried out and then joined the Word Alive, I was really excited about the combination of both heavy, melodic, and, you know, a lot of experimental atmospheric elements that I felt like the band had, which to me made it kind of separate from a lot of the other bands that I had been touring around at that time. And I was transitioning from playing bass and doing backup vocals in Greeley Estates, shifting into learning how to be a real frontman. I didn't know how to scream when I joined the Word Alive. I faked my way basically through the tryouts and then did all my singing parts for the first song. I think the first song I recorded was How to Build an Empire. I did all the singing, which is pretty common for, especially back then. Now I do it all at once, but back then I would do all the singing first and then screaming after. So I did all the singing. Next day, come in to do all the screaming. All the music's done. It's the last thing that needs to be done, and it just sounded like dog shit. The band's freaking out. Zach and some of the older members were like, "We made a mistake. This isn't our guy." And Tony was like, "No, I feel like he can learn." In which anybody who knows how to scream knows that learning in like one day is not necessarily realistic. But our producer at the time said, his name's Corey Spots, and he was like, well, we can take a day off and then that's it. Like, we have one day to get this. Went to a practice space and Tony just played a ton of As I Lay Dying riffs and breakdowns. And I just tried to scream until something sounded like a scream or good enough. I kind of hit that moment where it sounded kind of good, and he was like, that. He's like, just do that. And so I came back the next day and then recorded the song, and it was that and Battle Royale, the demos that I did were the first time I ever screamed on any recording. The start of my voice, I would say, started back then, but definitely was singing and really going from, I feel like I was mimicking other styles and other people to really finding what works for me. That took a lot of time. It took about 3 years until I felt comfortable with singing and screaming, and then it took another 3 years for me to be able to consistently rise to the level of performing live on par with what the album vocals were. We had some issues on the road. I would lose my voice. I wanted to be able to sustain, what we were doing, but we didn't know what we were doing. And, the idea back then of changing the key of a song was like, no, this is what we did in practice. Like, this is how it is. We didn't know anything. We wrote what sounded good in the moment, and we didn't change it ever, and that's shifted a lot over the years. I feel like I've only really found my voice in the last couple years. Going from day one till now, I feel like I hear like two different people, and it's the beginning stages of like trying to fit in with other people versus trying to let my natural ability shine through.
For me, I grew up in a super small town. I've played drums I'm 31 now, and I played drums for 21 years. I played in my room alone for the longest time, and it was never ever apparent to me that I could ever do it professionally or do it and actually make a living doing it. I was a huge introvert, and I would say I still am, but because of touring and being in this band, it's really opened me up as a person, and it made it easier for me to connect with other human beings and and people. It's made it easier for me to like just have a conversation with someone I don't know, and like before when I was younger, I was, super nerdy and super quiet, and I always struggled with that. So being in a band has really helped me branch out socially and just be more comfortable with myself, honestly.
I never set out to like be in a band or be a musician. That's not what my dream was growing up. My dream was basketball and sports, and then it was psychology and study of child psychology, and just how I could potentially help like at-risk youth and people who had gone through, whether it's divorces, abuse, random things. Like my whole goal was just like I just wanted to help people, but on the side from hopefully playing like the NBA. And so that didn't happen because I stopped growing at 5'9", and I took that about as far as I could. And then music had started to creep in as this thing that accompanied this drive in sports, and then it also enabled me to have more of a social connection with some of the people that I thought were really unique and interesting, because a lot of the quote-unquote jocks that I would play sports with, they weren't necessarily as emotional or in tune with like the world. They were just kind of like, sports is life and that's all. And then there were these kids at school that were like passing around records and making like burn CDs for each other. And I would hear some music sometimes that I never heard before, and I'm like, I don't know what this is, but this is really cool. And then I thought they all dressed the coolest in school, and I was like, there's something in this world that I just don't know. When I was in kindergarten, I went to like speech therapy, and I had a really bad stutter. I still do every once in a while. I was taught how to work around it when I was younger, but the idea of speaking in front of people has always terrified me. I'm very nervous and I'm very shy overall when it comes to that, but I've learned how to work around that part of me, and it's definitely still there. But it's very ironic to me that out of all things I could have done, I chose literally just speaking in front of people and singing in front of people all around the world, which going back to, my younger years would have never been anything that I would have thought for myself. But I just had this draw towards it, and I'll talk to my family these days, and I'm like, it's kind of funny because I still ended up like helping a lot of people and helping kids and younger people and even older people now who have gone through a lot of the same things either I have or I've experienced, that I've been able to share through music. And I think the biggest thing for me that it did in being in the Word Alive, it gave me a voice, it gave me a purpose, and it gave me something that is so much bigger than whatever I'm able to accomplish on my own terms. When we were coming off of our debut EP, Empire, we were picking up some buzz and our own fan base and people who really loved what we were doing. Then we went in and recorded Deceiver. We kind of felt this like it was us against the world thing, and we were kind of unnecessarily angry at the time because we felt like had been jilted in some way, because we felt, and I can say this now, a little bit of a false ego and pride. We kind of gained a reputation for being a live band, which is, in my opinion, the best compliment you can give a band is by saying that they're better live than on record, or that it connects with you on just a different level live. So our whole thing back with Deceiver was we just wanted to kind of show what we could do, but we had that like chip on our shoulder, and I think a lot of that stemmed from just wanting to separate ourselves and have our own name and be just, the association just be what we're doing in the moment. And I think you're always battling with other bands, with different sounds, shifts in sounds, your fan base. From the moment you start, you have this little core, and then as you make more and more songs, it grows and grows outward, but they're all going in like different directions. They're all connected from this central point. They might like your band for 10 different reasons. You have 10 different people in a room. So it started to become this thing where we were trying to like really push the boundaries of what we thought we could do, but mostly for the sake of what we thought people wanted. We didn't, in my opinion, really have an identity back then, because I feel like you can listen to the songs, and while I feel like they are unique and they're special for the time, you can definitely hear that we loved Under Oath and As I Lay Dying and Killswitch Engage and Slipknot, and we tried to meld all that, and Seosin actually on the more melodic side, and we tried to like meld those things together rather than become our own thing. When we recorded Deceiver, I was the oldest in the band and I was 21. Everyone else was 18 or 19. And we were just stoked to be able to record a full-length record. We thought that was the sickest thing. We weren't even thinking like 6 months down the line back then. And then we started playing things like Warped Tour for the first time. And we did half of Warped Tour 2010. And then Kevin said he loved our band, immediately invited us for the next year. And we were like, this is crazy. Like, this is Warped Tour. This is the best tour in the world to be on. And it really did help shape and grow our career. But we still didn't know who we were yet. When you first start out, you're like, yeah, I just want to play as many shows as I can. And then you start to have people realizing maybe they don't want to play as many shows as they possibly can. So we started to have some member changes and, you know, just people being like, you know what? I like sleeping in my own bed, not in a van 10 months out of the year, or, you know, trying to survive off $5 to $10 a day. We always kind of had this policy back then, even, that's like, hey, there's no judgment. That's why we're all friends with every past member we've ever had, is we never wanted someone to just stay in the band for the sake of like ourselves or the band itself. And so that was one good thing that we held back then. But for the most part, we didn't know what we were doing. With Life Cycles, which is the first record, a lot of people, you know, don't know that Matt actually tracked drums for it.
Enter Matt Horn.
Yeah, enter Matt Horn. Matt Horn has entered the chat. It definitely is nostalgic for us. To me, that record is the most nostalgic record for The Word Alive, because I think it's the first time we touched on the overall message that is The Word Alive today. And I'd say, like, with the song Life Cycles, with Empire and Deceiver, we would have, you know, one-liners into breakdowns that everyone would sing, and we would have these really special moments at shows that was, honestly, it was super fucking sick. But it doesn't necessarily mean someone's really diving deep into your band and connecting with your band. When Life Cycles came out and the title track really started connecting with people, and we were seeing 5, 10, 20 kids a show with the lyrics tattooed on their bodies, and the song went from being no one knew it to within a couple months it was the loudest we'd ever heard anyone sing for our band. We were all kind of like, this is kind of crazy. Like, this is what it's like to be in a band of those bands that we looked up to, where we would go to the shows and see crowds reacting. It was like, this is the message of the band. But we were also still really young and naive in business, and going through a lot of growing pains and shifting through member changes of, you know, from one album to the next. You go from Empire through Life Cycles, it's 3 years going into 5 years of the total cycle from Empire through the Life Cycles album cycle. It's half a decade, you know. A lot of bands don't even last that long, let alone, you know, you getting along with everyone, knowing your place, feeling yourself grow as a man, and your own identity meshing well with everyone and meshing well with tour life, because it just isn't for everyone. There was the beginning of a shift in our band, but we weren't aware that it was shifting yet. We started to have some internal issues for the very first time. We were at Joey Sturgis' studio in Connorsville, Indiana. I was not on the same page as the guys, and definitely not at Joey, with Joey at the time. You know, we're since friends, and he's a huge part of that record. I just felt so disconnected, and I was like, some of these songs aren't songs I'm feeling, and for me, I only want to write to music that, like, I feel an emotional connection to, because to me, if I don't feel that, then I'm just writing something to write it. I'm not writing from a feeling, which to me is just the way I like to write. So there's several songs on that record that I would have preferred not to be out there in the world, But that song and a couple of the other songs on the record I think are super, super great. I think Dragon Spell is amazing. For its time, I think it's one of the sickest metalcore songs. Life Cycles obviously was gigantic for our band and just propelled us into a much bigger realm in the music scene. Astral Plane is like the first dose beyond Life Cycles of like something that I don't think anyone else was doing at the time, and it really had a lot of emotion and ambience to it.
Entirety
was a great song. We were still stuck in the what we were touring
what do they want
with
us to do
and listening to, and what do people think we should be, and we were trying to navigate what that was, because we didn't actually have a clear vision of what we wanted at that point. We were still growing, we're still learning, we're still, mind you, getting to know each other. And while you're growing as an individual, but you're also trying to grow together, and you have your own lives back home, when you're immature, and not necessarily immature in a negative way, but you just don't know life yet, it was really hard for us for a couple years to like find what we all wanted to do. So I feel like we were all giving like way of what we really wanted to do to try to make everyone in the band happy, and we were doing that as a band of trying to make everyone happy. That cycle was a game changer for the band. It was the first time where we were like, maybe we can do this for like a career. But there was also the beginning of the end of that era of The Word Alive had started in that album cycle. Definitely hearing crowds sing your songs passionately for the very first time, really. There were so many shows where I would have goosebumps or I would tear up, and I'd get off stage and I'd feel invincible. Everything bad that had ever happened to me in my life, I was like, it's all worth it for this. And that was the first time I ever felt that way in my entire life. So that's why that record, means so much. It is, admittedly, hopefully this doesn't frighten anyone, it is my least favorite album as a whole of our band, but it has the most impactful moment of our band's career. And so for me, I'm so thankful, because I think if Life Cycles hadn't have been on that record, we probably wouldn't be a band right now, which is hard to think about, but that song changed our lives, and it made thousands and thousands of new fans for our band that saw the message even before we did. How do you feel about Real?
I wasn't there for Real.
Yeah, but how like when you heard those songs compared to being a part of Life Cycles?
Real to me was, we got Luke Holland now. Like, drums are almost as upfront as like a lead guitar player in that album. That might be my least favorite album. That one seemed like it had the least amount of direction from an outsider's perspective. But I know, like, in our VIP every day, there's so many people that's their favorite album.
We were stumbling through and landing on some great moments where we got very fortunate and very lucky with how certain songs connected. And the reason that certain people, this is, I think, one of the things is, we would have like Tony's songs and Zach's songs. And for Life Cycles and Real, that was the case. Like, both of those albums, it was, for the most part, one or the other. And there was this push and pull of like, well, if you have 4 songs, you have to have 4 songs. And so it wasn't necessarily like the best songs, or it wasn't necessarily like the overall Word Alive feel being driven through all the songs. Part of the record, which is like Play the Victim, which everyone loved. Then you have this experimental heavy side like Terminal, 94th Street, the last track Collapsing, which is my favorite track on that record. That's almost like its own band. Play the Victim and maybe Never Forget, or it's like its own band. Then you have like Lighthouse and The Runaway, which is like another band. And it felt like
it's all
there's
on the same record.
A Glass Castle is an amazing metalcore song. That's one of my favorite heavy songs we've ever made in our career. But it's like you put that right next to Lighthouse, and it's literally a different band. But the reason that Lighthouse is so big on that record is, I do understand it's simple, straightforward, catchy, and the message of the song. And I think the message of the song carried
It links up with how Life Cycles.
Exactly. I think going from Life Cycles, a lot of people really loved like Lighthouse and The Runaway because they were uplifting and they were about, you know, chasing life and kind of like facing things and just, you know, a lot of hope was in them. And I think people in our scene of music, a lot of them are looking for that in music. They're not just looking for angry music. They're looking for music that makes them feel alive and feel like things will get better. We had throughout this record a combination of issues that we were still trying to figure out through from Life Cycles. But then, yeah, you add in Luke, who was an established YouTube drummer. He wanted to prove himself in a band, and we wanted to let him feel like he could prove himself through the band. There was not a lot of vision. It was just like, let's each do our thing. Everyone's happy, but no one was really happy. And then we had a huge issue. Our producer, Cameron Mizell, you know, lost a bunch of files, and there's parts of the songs that we tracked that are completely gone and missing from the final versions. And we had all the files sent to Dan Corniff to try to salvage. And, you know, he might have like a vocal track from track 8 was in the files for track 2, and the bass guitar from track 3 is in the session file for track 9. So he had to piece together every single song and try to make do with it. We actually we've started a podcast, and it hasn't launched yet, but one of the episodes we talked about how I talked about how I think if that record was re-recorded and mixed properly, we probably would like it a lot more. But we still were not sure who we were as a band. And I think we were holding on to the past, looking at certain songs that had been successful for our band, and trying to figure out a way of how do we keep this going, because we didn't know what we wanted to do, but we knew we didn't want to stop. And so that's kind of where we were at, is like that midlife crisis, I would say, is real. When we started getting into Dark Matter, we had all sat down. We almost broke up, and we had the conversation of like, do we still want to do this? And if we're going to do this, we need to start figuring out who we are and what music we're going to want to play 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, if we're able to, because we were already starting to feel really disconnected from some of our earlier material. I really feel like Dark Matter was the first inkling of us all being on the same page. We had the most shared vision for our music to date on that record at that time. And that's why until what we'll get to, obviously, our newest record, but until this newest record, I feel like Dark Matter was the most we were in tune at that point of being a band. And I feel like the songs were better. They're darker, but in a very interesting way. The heavy parts weren't necessarily just heavy for the sake of being heavy. I really was more calculative over how I used my voice. I really wanted to start singing more because that was what I originally wanted to do in the first place. And I wanted the heavy parts to be like impactful when they hit, instead of just screaming all the time and only singing in the choruses. So that was kind of like the shift for me vocally, and the guys then were able to start just developing their own identity within the songs themselves, and I think so it started to become fun again.
Well, Violent Noise was another member change.
Yeah.
So I feel like the dynamic that may have been built during Dark Matter might have been affected because you guys lost Luke and Daniel for Violent Noise.
Me, Zach, and Tony have written the majority of every song we've ever done, but it would be a disservice to Luke and Daniel to say that their impact wasn't heavily felt while they were in the band in particular. I mean, Daniel wrote all his own, bass parts, and he's an actual bass player that really cares about the groove of a song. He wants to play the proper role. He's not trying to overplay. And he could keep up with Luke, rhythmically speaking. But you had us still trying to figure out exactly who we were. We were getting closer and closer. but we took a step backwards because towards the end of the cycle, when we knew Luke was leaving months before I want to say like 6 or more months. We knew on Warped Tour, and he didn't leave till the end of the year. So yeah, it was like 6 months that we knew Luke was going to be leaving, and there was a couple months where like I knew, but no one talked about it, and I was like, oh, I know Luke. He's like a little brother to me. I was like, he's going to leave the band soon. But I think he felt a lot of weight of like he didn't want to let us down. And for us, going back to the beginning of our band, we always wanted everyone to be, if you're in it, we want you to be here because you love it and you're loving your life. Like, we don't want anyone to, life's too short, to just stay somewhere where you feel like you're maybe meant for something else. He is and was. And I'm thankful that he, said how he really felt, because he's gone on to do great things, and we were able to have Matt, who I feel like the way that the band has shifted towards and what we were taking from Dark Matter, I don't think we moved the needle forward in all ways with Violent Noise, but I feel like we were still going through those growing pains of figuring out our sound, figuring out ourselves. I mean, at that time, I was starting to like really fall apart mentally, emotionally. I was coming out of a 6-year relationship. It was really, really hard on me. I really felt disconnected from the band yet again, just because of certain things, on the business side. We had transitioned with managers, and I was doing a lot of business stuff and kind of feeling isolated from the band, which played a huge role on the music itself, because the guys, I think, felt for the most part like I was kind of like dad, and instead of like I'm just one of the guys. And because some of these things are a necessary evil within music and we have to do business things, I kind of like drew a line in the sand of like, this is where I'm at and this is what I'm doing, and if you're not doing this, then it was almost like if you're not with me, you're against me. And so like tour was kind of destructive for a lot of us at that time, and I think we were all starting to realize like something's not right, but still no one wanted to hurt anyone's feelings, so there wasn't a lot of communication. So when we're doing the record, we're all kind of going through something in our own personal lives, but no one was talking about it. And you can feel it in some of the songs. Similarly, in a way to Life Cycles and Real, there were pockets, there were moments that we stumbled into. We had like Why Am I Like This is our biggest song. That just kind of like just happened. And without that song, without Red Clouds, without a couple of the songs that have really popped through for our band, maybe we don't get to Monomania. And it was the hardest. The Violent Noise album cycle was the hardest album cycle on our band by far. Each of us were just going through so many life issues, personal things, and feeling so alone on the road. We were each getting eaten up with depression, anxiety, stress. There was just this go, 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 and there was no stopping. And so Violent Noise was like a bittersweet chapter for our band, because it could have been this amazing moment, but because we weren't taking care of ourselves individually at the time and communicating with each other, the cracks started to show in our band. And honestly, I think a huge reason that we got through that is having Matt, having someone new that didn't have 10 years of baggage.
Yeah, I was starry-eyed during this entire thing, because this was my, like, I had toured before, because I had played in another band in the past. I didn't tour on this level ever, so I think my first tour with the guys was Asking Alexandria and Us in Europe, and that was just massive shows, on the other side of the planet, and I was just like, this is great. So I mean, I won't take full credit for that, but I could see how me being there just like
it helped.
Yeah,
it helped having someone that was excited, and it could remind you like, yeah, this is awesome. So we had like this crazy pitfall within the band was happening, and like I said, the cracks were starting to show. But we kept getting these great opportunities that kind of like carried the band through those things, like some great tours. In between Dark Matter and Violent Noise, we had written 2 songs. We took a music video budget we had and we asked Fearless if instead we could record a new song. We ended up recording 2 new songs. Those were Misery and Overdose. Those are the last 2 songs with Luke and Daniel, and we knew that Luke was going to be gone as we were tracking them, which kind of made them, in my opinion, the best songs we did with Luke, because he was doing what I think he felt was the best for us, going in the direction that we were going, which I give a lot of credit to him, because he could have just fucked off or not given a shit, but he really cared, and he tried to write, I think, meaningful, impactful parts that made the songs better. Daniel was going through a lot of the time, and he stepped down from the band in the Violent Noise album cycle because he needed time for himself, and he needed to reconfigure his own life. Losing him was also a hard thing for our band, because he didn't do the business stuff. He wasn't one of the main songwriters. He was always great, at his instrument, and it was kind of like happy-go-lucky, to a certain extent.
Always fun.
Yeah,
to be around.
He was never like a real big issue for us. I just think like we were all not in the best place, and he realized that for him, the healthiest thing he could do is leave. And he did that for himself and for us, which, is commendable as well. Shit hit the fan, but then we get like the biggest opportunity of our entire career with League of Legends thing with Riot Games. And so it's just like every time where we almost hit like the edge of the cliff, something would pull us away from it, whether it was one of us, a song, a tour, an opportunity. There was always something that was keeping us from like falling apart. And then our manager, Tim Kirch, who had stepped in, who also does like the main, their whole philosophy is they just build everything off friendship and communication and being open with themselves, each other, their fans. And he just started helping us reconnect with each other, which is like what saved our band, I think, in a lot of ways. And so then that was this whole shift in time that happened where we started communicating. We started telling each other our secrets that we'd held in. Oh, you had been doing this, and that really hurt my feelings, and it's been happening for 5 years or 7 years. And you're like, I had no idea. And then you start having all these things come out, and you feel like the weight's lifted, because ultimately we do love and care about each other a lot. We've traveled the world. We've grown up together. And so then, we sit here and we start having face-to-face conversations. What do we want to do? How's everyone feeling? Is everyone still like invested? And if so, like, let's fucking get our shit together and let's go make the best record of our career, but let's do it on our terms, our way. For the first time ever, let's not have a foot in the past. Let's only look forward. And so we started writing in November of 2018, I think is when No Way Out was written. And it wasn't written necessarily for the album, but we were just like, let's just see what happens. Let's just start writing. I'd actually come up with that song in California and shared it with the guys along with another song that didn't really make sense for us. That song just throughout the next several months kept still popping up as we were writing songs. It ended up being one of the cornerstone songs for Monomania, and we just spent months and months writing. We had sessions in Arizona, multiple sessions in California, where we would be like, hey Telle, come to Arizona and let's spend like a few days just writing. Let's just see what happens. But where we're not pressured of going into the studio like next week, or we have this studio time booked, and if we don't get prepared, then we're fucked. So we just didn't write any songs with any pressure. And then we get to California. We're doing some writing sessions, and we're writing in Eric Ron's studio, who's one of my best friends actually, which was how it kind of connected. He actually had done some vocal pre-pro on Real, and we tried to like make some music stuff happen back then, and we just weren't on the same page then. But Eric wanted another shot with the guys. How would you describe how we felt, in the summer when we were jamming?
I mean, we did the initial 2 weeks of writing when we were all there. It just went so easily and smoothly. We would just start with like a riff or an idea or maybe just a tempo, and a lot of stuff would just fall into place. And usually we wouldn't even, we wouldn't really track anything fully, we would start writing vocals to it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
You know, we would have like a chorus, and if vocals were doing, you know, if it was killing it and it sounded good, we would be like, all right, this is good, let's keep going.
I've been at every single second of every single studio day outside of, well, Life Cycles I recorded separately, but I was in a studio and going back and forth. But I've seen how our band has been in every studio setting and with every record and the excitement behind closed doors and the conversations. This is the first time we've all got along for the whole album process. This is the first time where there were no fights in the studio. This is the first time where there wasn't a me, it was a we. Like every song was like, not what can I do to make this song more me, but what can I maybe add that will make this song even more special than it already is. And if the answer was nothing, then there was nothing done, and that's never happened before. There's always been like an assertion of, I need to have this, you know, put into the song so that there's more me in it, but there is no me anymore in The Word Alive. It is just we, and the songs serve all of us because there's a vision behind it, there's passion behind it, there's a really strong message behind it. All of us are in tune with what the songs are about, what they mean, why we're writing them. You know, we went through together with every single aspect of it and worked on literally every single piece.
The rollout, the album artwork, the vibe, all that was done together in the studio, and it wasn't, you know, like Violent Noise, like album artwork was like kind of thrown together while we were in Europe. Yeah. Not even really in
Not
the
everyone
zone.
was really
we
even happy
about
with
it.
Yeah. This is the first time where we've 100% come to an agreement on every single aspect, from drums, bass, synth, guitars, vocals, lyrics, to every level of what our band is.
We all sat down together, picked names one night, picked out the album name.
We made it like fun to do all the little things, and then we knew that like the big picture was the most important thing, and we're like, we need to write a record that we love wholeheartedly, that we're going to go on stage and we're going to look and feel like a brand new band, because this is a brand new band. It's like our energy is so much more positive now. And I mean, for me vocally, I feel like this is the most I've ever felt me singing. I feel like with previous records, I was trying to cater my voice towards two things. One, what I'd already done, and then two, what was kind of the standard for the scene. And with this record, I just sang more like from my heart and soul of what I feel and what the song that connected with me emotionally. So I feel like, you know, it just shows. Like, I feel like we all have that though. Like Matt's drums, I feel like his voice shines through his drumming.
Yeah, this is the first record I ever got to practice any parts on before I went and recorded them. Like every other record, I've always showed up, heard the song a few times, or Life Cycles, I practice on the van ride to the studio on my lap, like, and then you know, Violent Noise, I showed up, here's the song, cool, play to it. But this, like, every night I was practicing the songs that I knew I was going to be recording the upcoming week or whatever. So I took time, and you know, we all took our time, I feel like, a lot on this one, make sure it was like perfect. Even when it came down to, we had what, 32 songs?
Yeah, we had
and
over 30.
It was brutal.
To me, this is The Word Alive. We deserve this record. We went through the ringer and we came out with this. And to go through what I know we've gone through as a band, and then individually some of the things that we've endured or that we've put each other through, even to come out on the other side and write this record. I mean, all I can be is proud of it and of ourselves, and be proud of my bandmates for, you know, everything they've endured and put up with me, and each of us, what we've all gone through. So it's kind of crazy when you think about it, big picture. And you know, we're sitting here right now in Cleveland. We have a bunch of boxes over here of signed vinyl that a bunch of our fans want because they believe in our band. And so to go from this small band that didn't know who we were in 2009 to being in 2020, it feels pretty good to be here.